This tourist thought his money and status gave him the right to do anything. He crossed the line, mocking the royal guard in front of the crowd. But when the guard finally turned his head, the entire crowd froze. No one expected the day to end with police sirens, roaring applause, and one humiliated king of the world. What really happened? Let's start from the beginning. Buckingham Palace stood as a beacon of tradition, surrounded by the usual buzz of tourists. Cameras clicked, children giggled as they darted around the fences, and Guard James, as unyielding as a marble statue, maintained his post. His posture was impeccable, his red uniform gleamed in the sun, and his towering bearskin hat seemed to command respect, or at least it should have. For most, James was a symbol of heritage, discipline, and unwavering honor. But not everyone saw it that way. Cue the arrival of a bright red tour bus. The air shifted as its doors opened, unleashing a whirlwind of chaos, led by one man. Brawny, loud, and sporting a baseball cap emblazoned with the words, "King of the World." Brian strode onto the scene with the swagger of someone who clearly believed he owned the place. Behind him trailed a noisy gaggle of fellow tourists, eager to follow his lead. "Oh, look at this guy, a real-life palace guard," Brian bellowed, his voice cutting through the hum of the crowd. "Hey bro, are you even real?" The group erupted in laughter. Phones were whipped out, and the cameras turned to capture what promised to be a spectacle. "Come on, give us a smile, man," Brian continued, stepping dangerously close to James, far beyond the boundary marked for tourists. His audacity was palpable, earning a few nervous chuckles from onlookers. James didn't flinch. His face remained stoic, his composure unwavering. If the disrespect bothered him, he didn't show it. "Look at him! He's like a robot," Brian declared, turning to his audience with exaggerated gestures. "Let's see if his hat's even real." He reached out, fingers hovering near the iconic bearskin, but stopped short when James's gaze locked onto his. It was the kind of stare that could cut steel, silent, but full of unspoken warning. All right, relax, bro," Brian laughed nervously, trying to save face. "But seriously, is this guy for real?" At this point, most would have walked away, but not Brian. Emboldened by the attention, he decided to up the ante. Grinning like he'd just thought of the world's funniest joke, he unscrewed the cap of his water bottle, lifted it theatrically, and tipped it over, splashing a small puddle dangerously close to James's impeccably polished boots. "Hey man, a little refreshment for your shoes, don't thank me all at once." The crowd erupted, some laughing, others visibly uncomfortable. A few people whispered among themselves, casting disapproving glances at Brian. The tension in the air thickened. James remained still, his eyes fixed straight ahead, but inside you could feel the quiet storm brewing. Everyone was waiting. Would he break his silence, his stillness, his legendary resolve? Spoiler alert, James was not the kind of man to crack under pressure. Brian had clearly decided it was time for his grand finale, the act that would forever crown him the king of the world in his own mind. With a smug grin and a dramatic flourish, he took a bold step over the stark white line painted on the cobblestones, the boundary that even the most daring tourists knew better than to cross. The crowd collectively gasped. The audacity. Some phones zoomed in, fingers hovering over record buttons while others muttered under their breath, "Oh, this isn't going to end well." It was then that Guard James finally moved, slowly, deliberately, and with an aura of unshakable authority. He turned his head. His gaze was not angry. No, it was calm, calculated, and piercing. It was the kind of look that made you question all your life choices up until that very moment. "Sir," James said, his voice sharp yet steady, carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "You have crossed the boundary set for your own safety. Step back immediately." The crowd fell silent, a ripple of tension running through it. For a brief moment, even Brian hesitated, visibly startled that the robot could talk. But instead of retreating, he did what arrogant people often do when they're caught in the wrong. He doubled down. "Oh my gosh, everyone. Did you hear that? He talks," Brian exclaimed, spinning to face his audience with theatrical flair. "I broke him. I actually broke him." A few in the crowd chuckled nervously, but the majority looked increasingly uncomfortable. James, meanwhile, stood unyielding, his posture exuding the discipline of someone who'd faced far worse than a belligerent tourist. And then, it happened. A small boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, wriggled out of his mother's grasp and darted toward the line, utterly mesmerized by the massive horse standing behind James. The child's innocent curiosity led him straight into danger, his tiny feet skidding precariously close to the towering animal's hooves. Without hesitation, James sprang into action. In one fluid motion, he stepped forward, scooped the boy up, and carried him back to the safety of his mother's arms. The crowd erupted, not in laughter this time, but in applause. Some clapped, others murmured words of awe. "Did you see that?" someone whispered. "That was incredible." James, now standing back at his post, fixed his gaze firmly on Brian. "Sir," he said, his tone unwavering, but laced with a quiet intensity. "Reckless behavior can lead to tragedy. Consider yourself warned." Brian, suddenly finding himself the focus of disapproving stares, raised his hands defensively. "Hey, that wasn't my fault," he stammered, glancing around for support. "The kid just ran out." The boy's mother, however, wasn't buying it. Her glare was so icy, it could have frozen the Thames. "Maybe if you weren't acting like a complete fool, my son wouldn't have been distracted," she snapped, pulling her child closer. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically. What started as a spectacle for Brian's ego had transformed into a stark reminder of the discipline, honor, and humanity embodied by the guards. As the applause subsided, the crowd's whispers grew louder. Unbelievable composure. "That guard deserves a medal? What an absolute idiot that Brian is." James adjusted his posture, his face once again a mask of stoic calm. To him, it was just another day on duty. To everyone else, it was a lesson in dignity versus disgrace. Just when it seemed like the chaos had finally subsided, a voice cut through the uneasy murmurs of the crowd, a crisp, no-nonsense tone that demanded attention. "Shame on you." All heads turned to see an elderly tourist, her gray curls framed by an elegant scarf, glaring daggers at Brian. She stepped forward, her finger pointed like a sword. "This is a royal tradition, young man, and you're behaving like a spoiled child." The crowd erupted. This was the spark they had been waiting for. "She's right," someone shouted. "Get out of here, Brian," another chimed in. Brian, still standing too close to the white line, blinked as if he couldn't quite process what was happening. His confidence was slipping, and for once, his signature grin faltered. He raised his hands in mock surrender. All right. No need to get all dramatic," he muttered, though his voice lacked its usual bravado. But the crowd wasn't buying it. Phones stayed locked on him, capturing every angle of his growing discomfort. The very audience he'd hoped to impress had turned into a sea of disapproving faces, their murmurs growing louder with each passing second. And then, like a deus ex machina sent to deliver poetic justice, a pair of police officers appeared. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea, their uniforms immediately commanding respect. Brian's face went pale. "Hey, come on, this is just a misunderstanding," he tried, his voice climbing an octave. The officers approached James first, who, despite the ruckus around him, had not moved an inch from his post. His face remained unreadable, the epitome of professionalism. "Everything all right here, sir?" one of the officers asked, his tone respectful. James's response was as calm as ever. "Absolutely," he said, adjusting his bearskin hat with a precise, deliberate motion. Then, as if the entire debacle had been nothing more than a passing breeze, he resumed his stance, his eyes fixed ahead. The crowd buzzed with excitement. The sight of James's unshaken composure was enough to reignite their admiration. "Unbelievable," someone whispered. "That guard is a rock." "Respect. Pure respect," another added, their phones still aimed at the scene. Meanwhile, the officers turned their attention to Brian, who was now frantically gesturing toward his tour group, as if hoping someone might back him up. Unsurprisingly, no one did. The crowd's allegiance was firmly with James. "Sir, we need to have a word," one officer said, motioning for Brian to step aside. As the officers escorted him away, the crowd erupted into applause, not for Brian's exit, but for James's steadfastness. The elderly tourist who had started the public dressing down gave a satisfied nod. "About time," she muttered, and the crowd agreed with a collective hum of approval. By the time the scene had cleared, dozens of videos had already hit the internet. Within hours, clips of James calmly putting Brian in his place had gone viral, racking up millions of views and countless comments. "That guard is the definition of class, Brian. Not so much." Can we give this guard a medal and maybe Brian a lesson in basic respect? King of the world? More like clown of the day. Brian's smug grin became the face of ridicule, immortalized in countless memes. One particularly popular image featured him holding his water bottle with the caption, "When you try to be the main character but end up the punchline." Oh, and James? He became an internet hero. People marveled at his poise, his quick thinking with the child, and his ability to withstand behavior that would have made most lose their temper. For those who witnessed it live, one image lingered in their minds: James standing tall and resolute in front of Buckingham Palace, a living symbol of discipline, honor, and tradition. As the sun set over London, James remained at his post, unmoved by the day's chaos. To him, it was just another day on duty, but to everyone else, it was a reminder that dignity and respect still held their place in the modern world, no matter how loudly the king of the worlds of the world might try to claim otherwise.